Right, good evening. Welcome to tonight's meeting of Burnside Council, being held in the Civic Centre. Our temporary meeting. Thank you. Our temporary meeting location that allows for appropriate social distancing. Welcome to those viewing live via live stream, and I remind them that the agenda can be located on the Council's website. First, a reminder that the usual meeting etiquette and protocols apply in addition to mandated procedural meeting requirements. You'll be able to see the minutes in progress on your individual screens via the Zoom link sent to you today. We'll be using show of hands to indicate your desire to withdraw an item, to gain my attention or to speak. I ask you raise your hand high so that I can see it for voting as well. Our CEO will support me in identifying the order of speaking and to ensure fairness and equity for all. It will be appreciated by all here and by those viewing from home that you speak clearly, only when asked and required to do so, remembering that your comments and remarks may be heard when you are not officially debating. And I believe we have extra microphones here tonight, and we were alerted to that extra concern earlier today. Please show appropriate etiquette and respect for each speaker. And for your information, the toilets are located in a corridor to the rear of the Bill Dean Lounge, and in the case of a fire or other emergency, you are asked to follow instructions from council staff. So before we begin, please could you turn off your mobile phones or place them on silent, and now stand for the opening acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the land that we meet on is the traditional land of the Kaurna people, and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Adelaide region, and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still important to the Kaurna people today. We also pay respect to the cultural authority of Aboriginal people visiting and attending from other areas of South Australia and Australia. On behalf of the City of Burnside, I gratefully acknowledge and pay respect to those who have sacrificed their lives for this country and its people. We pray for understanding and guidance in our debate as we make decisions that will impact on the lives of all who reside, study, work in, or live in, or visit Burnside, the City of Burnside. Grant us wisdom as we serve our community. Thank you. Please be seated. We have one apology this evening, and that is from Councillor Davey. Are there any conflicts of interest likely to be required by elected members? No. No one on leave of absence. Confirmation of minutes. I'm seeking a mover. Thank you, Councillor Cornish, seconded by Councillor Henschke. All those in favour? Carried. No deputations, no petitions, no public question time, no questions on notice. So we do have motions on notice. The first one being Councillor Lemon, under International High School Building and Traffic Management.
Thank you. Now I have a variation to this that should be on screen.
Oh yeah.
We're always inclined to look up there for those screens. It's supposed to have it.
It's in there.
It's down the bottom.
Absolutely.
So my variation is I sent this email to you all in the last week or so. So I'll just assume that you've read it, and possibly wrongly, but I'll assume you've read it anyhow. So I'll just go through this.
Yes, Councillor.
I'll second it, that's all. Mindful.
What's that last?
It's Harvey's fault.
Okay, I'll continue.
Yeah.
You'll recall that this was presented.
Just 2 seconds. Question or
I'll just indicate.
Just wait until Councillor has finished speaking, and then you can second it.
Thank you. You remember that we actually had a similar motion before us at our last meeting. This one is similar but quite a bit different, and I'll go through it. What I'm asking for here is, in the first instance, a presentation to take place at a council workshop. One of the things I think that we were missing last time was the information that we needed to make decisions on this particular issue. and the sorts of things that we talked about, the GTA traffic report, but we've also got, in February 2020, council administration did a traffic count of Lestrange Street, and it was quite comprehensive. We've got the proposed building plans for the school that we can all have a look at. We've got a memorandum of understanding with the school. Queen Street, if you know the area, used to go all the way from Lestrange to Conningham. Way back in the day, there was a gymnasium built there. Council actually paid $65,000 for that. The school paid $35,000 and the state government picked up the rest. So as a result of that, we closed that road. I see in the new plans, there's a new gymnasium to be built as part of their renovations. I think it's important for us to look at what the plans are for the old one. Our memorandum of understanding is actually due for renewal in 2020. So this year it hasn't been renewed yet. So it's good for us to have a look at that as well. The catchment area, I read in recent times that 43% of students that go to Glenunga High School are out of zone. So it'd be good to look at what the catchment area actually is and the number of out of zone students. That might be difficult to get, but we could possibly estimate it. So I noticed that Councillor Carboni said last time 70% of students arrive without a car. Well, that other 30% are causing a lot of grief on the surrounding streets, and they may well be students that are out of zone. It would be good to have that information. And we would also look at things like the Glenside redevelopment. Last time I looked, they were proposing 1,000 extra dwellings. If any of those people have got children that go to school, where are they going to go to school? And commentary on the capacity of schools in the area. Well, I believe that Glenunga High School is currently a critical issue. That doesn't say that other schools actually are problematic in our city as well. And other relevant information about traffic flows, intersection upgrades and all sorts of other things that might be really pertinent to this. So we have a workshop. We look at collectively the sorts of strategies that we can put in place, because my belief is there's 13 of us, and 13 of us looking at an issue are going to come up with a lot better strategies than one or two of us. So I'd like us to have a workshop with all this information put before us, and we can look at what we can and can't possibly do. And then a report comes back to council at some stage in November, and that this report is good enough to form the basis of any other issues we might have with schools across the city. So I hope you support this. I think this actually covers the sorts of things that we might have been a bit nervous about in the last motion. And we will be doing a workshop on this at some stage in October, which is probably about 6 weeks away. So, you know, this is going to be done and dusted, one hopes, before the end of the year. So I hope you support it.
Councillor Carbone.
Thank you, Worship. Happy to second this motion. I do see it as the, I suppose the Diet Coke of what I put up last time, but it's a step in the right direction, which is a good thing. There was quite a bit of angst in the community in the last fortnight when the motion was defeated. There are a lot of worried people in the area about what the school redevelopment means for them. I've had a number of people talk about selling and so forth. So it is certainly front and centre on the minds of a lot of people. But like I said, I'm pleased. It's a step in the right direction. I really don't think, I have to say, I really don't think we're going to learn anything new that we haven't gone through already. Okay, the key hard data that is not disputed, that has come from the school, okay, is that they are definitely increasing big time. Okay, 1,800 to 2,200 students in 1 year. 2,200 students is going to mean that this school is the biggest public school in the state. What this means is we are going to have a school that is the size of Pembroke and Seymour together. So that's how big this problem could be and will be. We are also the school. The school has told us, and these figures could even be conservative, but the school has told us that 30% of all students come via car. Okay, and whether they're close or not, we don't know. Okay, but they don't catch a bus, They don't catch a train or bus or anything else. Okay, so they come by their parents' car or they drive themselves. The key hard data that is not disputed is also the number of staff. So we're looking at 170 staff. And again, the last figure, the second to last figure that is not disputed is the number of car parks for staff. So we've got 170 staff and 154 car parks. So straight away, you know, we've got a problem. We've got a problem. And then, of course, with the increase in people coming to the school, increase in number of people being dropped off, people know what the problem is now. They see it all day, every day. They know the problem. They know that whatever the problem is now, they're going to add 121 cars every morning, every afternoon. So that's the problem in a nutshell. Now, what we do moving forward. Now, of course, I don't want to jeopardise the report, but the school and the residents have already mooted several ideas. Parking restrictions is a no-brainer. We need to have proper parking restrictions spread evenly throughout the whole precinct. The school and residents are in support of a trial of making Lestrange one way, especially during the peak hour traffic. Because anyone standing there watching what happens is a no-brainer. You've got children crossing the road, you've got parents on either side of the road and so forth. It's a nightmare and it's very dangerous. So even they have suggested a trial of a one-way street. And of course, everyone has mentioned, even teachers that I've spoken to, monitoring pick-up and drop-off times, and that is there isn't really a clear designated kiss and drop zone. It's not clear. People park everywhere. Other side of the road, around the corner, they park everywhere. So it's a mess. So that's the problem. Now, yes, this is probably the long way of getting to where I would like to be, but it doesn't matter. We're going to get there. So I hope that when the workshop comes in October, and more importantly, when the report comes in November, you give this issue the respect that it deserves.
Councillor Hubel.
Thank you, Worship. I'm just going directly on what Councillor Carbone said. I think this issue actually is being treated extremely respectfully by the Chamber. I think the debate that we had last meeting is testament to the fact that this is not something that we're flippant about. So I guess by implication of Councillor Carbone's statement, I wanted to defend myself against not taking this seriously and not giving it respect. I think that what this motion does is fixes a problem that a lot of councillors last week had, which is that we felt ill-informed on the bigger picture. I think directly at a local Lestrange Street level, you can see that there's massive problems. No one's denying that there's a problem. No one's denying the problem's going to get worse. But I think what we need to do is really be considered with how we're going to address this problem. We know it's going to be a problem. We know it's a problem that's going to get worse. But we need to really make sure that we fix this problem before it happens. And to do that, we really need to be considered. So getting this extra information is only going to be a good thing, I think. I want to look at how we do things differently. Kiss and drops are dangerous because they're, because they are isolated in a small area. You've got more activity happening rather than it being spread out. I know that, bike parking. What are we going to be doing in that precinct to make it easier for people to not bring their cars? Those things are part of the bigger solution as well. Yes, parking's an issue. Yes, traffic management's an issue, but there is more to it. What other infrastructure does that area need to cope with all these extra teenagers that we're going to be having in our council area? So I think there's a lot to consider, and I'm really looking forward to being able to nut this out at a workshop level.
Councillor Davis.
I'd like to thank Councillor Levin for bringing back a good and solid motion. The motion we had last meeting was unpassable in my view. I think that this is the correct way of doing it. So we get the report, we actually look at the data, we look at a solution, and we do it in a measured way, rather than particular councillors bringing forward their own ideas about what's going to solve the issue. So this is absolutely the right way to proceed, and it's the best way to not make a mistake. And I guess I do begrudge the way that Councillor Carbone opened his statement tonight. And I think he used the word disappointing last meeting, and I'll use it for that comment. This is disappointing, your comments. So thank you, Helga, for bringing this motion. I'm happy to support it.
Anyone else who wishes to speak? Councillor Henschke, followed by Councillor Dawes.
Thank you, Mayor. A question regarding item 6. The report forms the basis for potential strategies for student numbers across the city. My question to the administration is, will the administration engage with the Department of Education on their strategies for student numbers in schools across the city?
Through Madam Mayor, certainly a key part of putting together this report needs to be detailed communications with the Department of Education. So the answer is yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Dawes.
I'm just trying to make sure we've got our words right here. And I was checking, I kind of lost my way, but from what Councillor Lemming sent us on Friday to what's here is a little bit different. I just want to make sure the words are right. I want to make another comment later too. She talks about, in number 5, increased student numbers on residential amenity at high schools. Is she talking about on residential amenity near high schools? I didn't quite know whether the words are right there. And perhaps Councillor Lemming can refer to that, because at the moment, I know what she's trying to say, but I don't know if the words are right there. But,
can I just add that the major other school really is actually going to be Norwood Morialta High School, Norwood High School, because the private schools within our city have already absorbed year 7s. It is only those 2 schools that haven't taken on board year 7s yet that potentially will have that very large additional number of students, as well as, of course, Norwood moving their entire Morialta Middle School to the parade.
But if I was a member of the public and I was reading that at number 5, I'd say residential amenity at high schools. I don't think the words are quite right there. Is it near or around high schools, or what is it?
Are you suggesting that there's a
change a word there? This report will increase student numbers on residential amenity at high schools. Perhaps we should have at high schools across the city after student numbers.
Councillor Lemon, or would you prefer a near, which would be just a simple change, as opposed to at?
It is actually it's a map thing, isn't it? How about around high schools?
Or you could have at high schools across the city after student numbers.
No, I don't want to change the sentence.
Oh, right. Yeah, around.
I'm
happy with around.
Around high schools across the city, are you happy with that?
Yeah, I think that's clearer.
Or because of high schools across the city? No?
But have a think about that.
Councillor Carbone, are you happy with around?
That's fine, yeah. Now, I am worried about the one about as far as possible commentary on the capacity of all schools, primary and secondary. What I'm worried about there is staff time, right? So therefore they've got to ring 14, forget how many there were now, primary and secondary schools in the Burnside Council, possibly contacting the principal or whoever is responsible to see what the effect will be in 2022, where the major issue currently, I'm talking about currently initially, is Glenunga High and Norwood High. So I'm just hoping that to get that information, we're not going to be delayed with having our workshop, because I don't think that is the major problem in primary schools at the moment. The major problem for us is the fact that Glenunga High and Norwood High are undergoing massive building improvements, for which there's going to be a huge increase in the number of students. So my question to administration is, by adding as far as possible commentary on the capacity of all the schools, is that going to in any way involve a fair bit of time? Could we leave that out and just concentrate on the two high schools? I don't know who to ask that.
Through Madam Mayor, we've actually had quite a reasonable amount of time to consider this motion as administration, and we are comfortable with the way it's been presented.
Okay, if you're comfortable, I'll leave it there. Thank you. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Right, if that's the case, I shall go back to Councillor Lemon.
Thank you. And thank you for your comments. It isn't true that we're not going to be getting anything new here, because everybody in this chamber, apart from Councillor Carboni and myself, will be getting information that they didn't have last time we mentioned this. So I think it's important to remember that. The other thing I think is important to remember is that this workshop is to explore potential strategies, not to look at quick fixes, because any quick fix that we might make is likely to be short term. I think we need to look at the longer term here, and that's the point of actually having a workshop where we can put our collective heads together to, in fact, look at strategies. We're not looking at solutions, we're looking at strategies in terms of dealing with this. And I will get on to Councillor Dawes' comment. As far as possible, I use those words very carefully, as far as possible in terms of not spending too much time, something that's quick. But I also understand that other people have got schools in their wards, and I think that we need to be aware of that, because whilst Glenunga High School is going to get Year 7 students, Linden Park Primary is going to lose them. I'd like to know what sort of effect that might have around residential amenity. Residential amenity to me is more than just traffic and parking. Residential amenity is also noise, rubbish, people coming into your front yard. There's a whole raft of stuff. I live on Lestrange Street. I live within 50 metres of the school. I haven't had any of my residents coming to me with, well, there's been one. One has come with potential fixes, which I've actually passed those suggestions on to our people here, and none of them really were viable in the longer term. It's not up to our residents to fix this problem. None of them are traffic engineers, as far as I know. The people that come to me, and I live on the street, my neighbours that come to me complain about the traffic, they don't complain about fixing it. And in fact, this week, I had one of my neighbours who lives next door to the school knock on my door and say to me, the school actually told me they sent out flyers to the neighbourhood. I'm an immediate neighbour and I didn't get one, and neither did the person at the back fence. So I think that we need to look at this in isolation from what the school tells us. The school is always going to put its own spin. And as a long-term resident of Lestrange Street, I can tell you with my hand on my heart, the school is not a good neighbour in that place, or hasn't been to date. I live in Hob. So I hope you approve this. I think this takes us forward in a considered way, where we consider it jointly and we look at a variety of different ways of dealing with the issue. I'm not disputing that we're going to end up with a load of students turning up at, another 200 students. I'm not disputing that we'll end up with the biggest high school in South Australia, in spite of the fact that it's smack bang in the middle of a residential area and it has no green space at all. I'm not disputing any of that. What I want us to do is look at how we as a council can manage our roads, our footpaths, and our residential amenity in spite of that. So I hope you support this.
Those in favour? Against? Carried. Ferguson Park, Conservation Park, Councillor Davis, 10.2.
Thank you. I suppose this issue began really 6 years ago for me anyway, when I came on council, and we're actually looking particularly at the water quality which was coming out of Boral at that time. Since that time, they put in a retention basin, and recently I've actually gone up and had a look, and kept an eye on that sedimentation which has been coming down the river, and that's vastly been improved. More recently, I was contacted by the Friends of Ferguson Conservation Park group, and we went through for a walk through the Ferguson Reserve. Now, if you don't know, they're an organisation or a group that's been going on for 40 years, and their president is currently Jeffrey Bishop. And they're coming up to their 40th year anniversary in 2022. And some of the things that we actually discussed were the current weeds that are throughout the park and their control. It was the state of the footpaths, and when it rains, they essentially turn into torrents, and what people do is they walk around them and they're continually widening. The makeshift dams that have been put in the river to try and slow that water collection actually divert water sideways and into the embankments. And there's a significant amount of fallen debris in the creek. So there is a number of different issues with Ferguson Conservation Park, and generally, in my view, we have a range of different opportunities for our residents to enjoy. You know, we have the manicured lawns of, say, Hazelwood Park, which is a great picnic spot. We have Michael Perry Reserve, which is an excellent adventure spot. We have the functionality of Kensington Gardens Reserve. And what I love about Ferguson Conservation Park is, given its age, you know, some of the trees there have been, you know, they're ancient. They've been there forever. And it's an incredibly natural reserve or a park within our community. And what makes it so special is it's so embedded within our community. And that also brings a lot of concerns, I suppose, from residents. One of the concerns that's been brought up is about bushfire management, for example. And I think what we need to do, and there's actually a lot of information that we have on the park and a lot of ways that we can potentially assist with it. So it's currently under the management of national parks, and they have a ranger who will normally be appointed there, generally someone who's junior to that park, and they're always very keen to work with the conservation group. And Jeffrey Bishop, who is their current president, I've spoken with him at length, spoken to him about the motion as well. They certainly support collating the information that they have here. So at the moment, the volunteers have put together their own park management policy or their plan, and it's not something that I think the council is really aware of. And I think that council can actually do a lot to assist there and offer resources to them, albeit that it is a national parks run area. I'd also definitely like to acknowledge the huge amount of work that Councillor Turnbull, Councillor Dawes have been putting into this. And I met with them about the park. And I think that this will assist the volunteers and council to look at ways that we can manage the park, or I suppose suggest some improvements to its management. It has a huge impact downstream as well. We're about to spend a significant amount of money on Kensington Gardens Reserve, and being able to improve that water quality through the river, I think, is very important to the success of that project. The makeshift dams have been installed by volunteers, and they do create a number of problems, in fact, and they're not really working to what they should be. And there's also, in terms of like slowing down the water as it races through. There's also a mysterious white pipe that is in the river, which I understand isn't SA water pipe, but it actually runs all year round at a constant stream, 24 hours a day at all times. That's what I understand. And so if it's not SA water, then what is it? And so this pipe has the difficulty that actually, well, it's good for native wildlife in that it produces water for them to drink, but it also has the issue that it allows foreign weeds to grow in the creek bed all year round, when if there was, had the periods of drought, they wouldn't actually survive. So there's quite a bit of a battle, and I'm just looking at that, the depth of that. If you've ever walked through and looked at the depth of that creek, it seems to be continuing to get deeper and deeper, and each week, and their actual next, the Friends of Ferguson Conservation Park are trying their best to look after it, and I think that we as a city can offer our assistance there. Particularly, I think, if we can collate this information, they already have a management plan, like I said, and actually a project or a view that they can proceed along. They have a work schedule, and the next meeting is actually on Sunday, the 6th of September at 10 a.m. If you're free, I think they're doing some weeding. So I hope that you can support this, and I think that this will be a good way to collate that information and that used by everybody.
Have a seconder? Councillor Cornish?
Don't need to speak.
Okay. Councillor Pickett, you had your hand up
I'll
almost.
second you. Yeah.
Subsequently, do you wish to speak?
No.
Councillor Turnbull?
I'm speaking against this motion, cannot support it in its current form. This motion, if passed, would involve council staff in the costs and time of preparing a report on issues where the answers to the points raised in Councillor Davis's motion are already known and where there are already strategies in place to address the issues in Ferguson Conservation Park. The motion is superfluous, will achieve nothing except to create unnecessary cost and work on the part of the council staff. To set the context, Ferguson Conservation Park, though within the Burnside ward, is not a city of Burnside Reserve. It's under the ownership and management of the State Department of Environment and Water. In 1949, Miss Alice F.E. Simpson bequeathed that area to the Government of South Australia on the condition it be preserved as a public park. In 1977, it was dedicated as the Ferguson Conservation Park, a small piece of remote country in suburbia. As a Burnside ward councillor and following concerns raised by a number of local residents at a neighbourhood watch meeting last year, I and my fellow councillor have been engaged throughout 2020 in discussions and negotiations and on-site meetings with staff of both City of Burnside and the Department of Environment and Water. It took longer to arrange these meetings due to bushfires and the COVID-19, but we had one. We had an on-site meeting on the 7th of August. Burnside Council Administration were there, Dr. Mark Ellis, our biodiversity champion, and 2 fire prevention officers from the Department of Environment and Water. And most of these issues in this motion were discussed. Council are aware of them. Councillor Davis is also fully aware of this, as we, the Burnside ward councillors, appraised him on these matters at a recent coffee meeting. To address some of the points in the motion, bushfire risk to local residents. The risk assessment has been undertaken and assessed as low risk. The advice is that in dry times, it is possible that fire could burn through the understory. However, the fuel load is not sufficient to generate a treetop fire. As the park area is so relatively small, it's not continuous with any large bushland area, the fire risk is rated as low. There will be annual slashing of weeds around the park perimeter. Both Burnside Council and the Department of Environment and Water have agreed to collaborate on this. Next one, the biodiversity of the park. The importance of the Ferguson Conservation Park as a remnant of original native eucalypt and pine vegetation is well known and well documented. Dr. Mark Ellis, who also attended our recent meeting, pointed out that flora is protected here, including the rare orchids. There are many websites with these details. A separate report on this is not justified. Fallen debris, as referred in the motion, forms a natural part of the ecosystem, and as part of the park management, it's not cleared up. This is a conservation park, not a picnic site. Water quality. Stonyfield Creek, which passes through the reserve, exits the Stonyfield Quarry area. As such, the water quality is already being monitored by the Department of Environment and Water. I accept this part of the motion though. Likewise, I could support a question on notice about the source of the stormwater that enters Stonyfield Creek through that pipe, the white pipe, the mysterious pipe, at the northeastern end of the park. Maintenance of paths. They're not badly eroded, as suggested in the motion. They're in quite good condition. I've been walking that park for 15 years and they haven't changed at all. Maintenance works are already planned by council in collaboration with the Department of Environment and Water. Improving the amenity of the park. I'm not sure what the purpose of this statement is. As already noted, this is a conservation reserve, not one where council is expected to provide amenities. Further, as noted, it's not a council reserve, but under the ownership and management of the state DEW. Anyone who wants to go to the toilet, have a barbecue or a playground, walk across the road to Belliat Reserve. So in summary, this motion is superfluous, proposes quite unnecessary work and expenses and will achieve nothing. I'm told that the cost of a report is $100 for every hour. Goodness me. I will also note that in putting this motion, Councillor Davis has been very disrespectful of us and the work that I have particularly been doing in this area. I find it offensive he would take this action without even having the courtesy to discuss it with the ward councillors. I do appreciate we're all elected to represent the people of Burnside, but this motion should not have been run without discussion with the ward councillors. There should have been some collaboration, especially when it's known by Councillor Davis that action was already being taken on these matters. Collaboration should be the key to making improvements for the residents of our council. And may I remind Councillor Davis, he asked me to leave a residents' meeting about the skate park last year, as it was his meeting for his residents in his ward. So I oppose the motion, no report, save the administration time and hence money, approximately $100 an hour, and trust us, the ward councillors, to work with the administration as we have been doing. We have plans for an explanatory leaflet for residents living in Marble Terrace and Stonyhill Road, and we have plans for a residents' meeting in a couple of months after the perimeter has been slashed. I ask you to vote this motion down. Thank you.
Councillor Carbone.
Thank you, Worship. Look, I'm not sure how I'm going to vote with this motion, but I just wanted to raise another topic that's related to this, and that's manners.
It's not relevant.
Now, we've been here
No
before.
interruptions, thank you.
I have a point of order, it's not relevant.
It's not a point of order. I'll be corrected. I stand corrected if I am corrected. It's not a point of order. The issue's already been raised by Councillor Turnbull.
Yeah, but it's not relevant to the motion.
Can you relate it specifically to the motion that is on the table, please?
Yes, thank you, Worship. It disappoints me that once again we are in a situation where an elected member has, for whatever reason, taken on another issue in another ward and totally undermined the ward councillors. Now, we've seen this before, and here we are again with this same problem, and we are not showing the respect of we're not showing each other mutual respect. We are not showing Councillor Turnbull respect. We're not showing Councillor Dawes respect.
Councillor Piggott?
No, I'm just next.
Okay.
No, I don't want a motion on order.
So I want to make it clear that this sort of activity is not on, and it's rude. It is quite frankly rude. I know the ward councillors have been working on the issue because I've been hearing it while I've been sitting here. And I know they were not aware of this until they read about it on Thursday night. Now,
Councillor Carbone, can I just ask you to now focus specifically on the motion?
I'll enter your worship.
Your point has been made, so now it's...
And this is not a laughing matter.
No.
This is not a laughing matter.
Councillor Carbone, ignore it. Just carry on with what you have to say.
No, I've finished. I'll end there.
Okay. Now, Councillor Piggott then.
Look, I have a question, if I may, to administration. We've clearly got a motion of notice here seeking to have stuff happen, and we've got Councillor Turnbull discussing about stuff that is in train. Could I have a view from the administration as to where we are up to in regard to Ferguson Conservation Park, from an administration point of view, please?
Sure, Madam Mayor, I'd like to refer that to Mr. Cant.
Mr. Cooper. Mr. Cant? Or is...
I'm happy who is more prepared to answer the question.
No,
We collaborate closely on a number of matters. Through your worship, the Barton tapers. I understand there was a meeting on site. I wasn't present, but some of my staff were present, and Mr. Cooper was present for this one. However, we have been in contact with the department responsible for this area. We've taken some of the feedback that was raised at the day on board. It's our understanding we're working directly with the department with respect to reducing the load, particularly with fire management and also the maintenance around the creek. So we're waiting to hear back from the department who have arranged or said that they will take care of that, and we'll continue discussions with them. As far as anything else, that's about the extent of it at this stage.
Yes, through the Mayor. I can confirm that we've had notification from the department today that they are willing to do the slashing process around the boundary next to St Peter's School. They're going to do that themselves, but then would like a discussion directly with council, us, in terms of future ongoing arrangements for weed control. And they're very keen to hear the work that Mark Ellis has recommended. So that's really encouraging. They've also given us some information for the leaflet that we can dispatch to the residents. and have also offered to attend a local neighbourhood meeting that can be arranged through the ward councillors. So we've made good progress on all of those fronts that were agreed at our meeting with them on site.
Councillor Biggett, another
Could I
question?
speak to
or
the
do you
motion
speak?
then? Yeah, could I speak?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I'm not a believer actually that we have hard borders between wards as such. I don't feel that while we are territorial, and I certainly am territorial, we've got to be a bit careful that doesn't get in the way of doing things properly. Secondly, though, I do think Councillor Davis has misstepped here without carrying his fellow councillors, the relevant ones at least, along with it. And there's been a bit of commentary on that, but I think that's where I will leave it, and hopefully perhaps we all will. I think based on the answer from administration, actually, I don't think we do need a report. The frustration here probably is that we are, we'll be again labelled publicly possibly that we've knocked back a report on Ferguson Conservation Park without people knowing the facts necessarily, but it does sound like it's well in play, and so I won't support the motion.
Councillor Lemon, we're next.
Yes, we'll start with a question. In terms of a report, how much time would it in fact take, given that Councillor Turnbull's told us that this information is out there? I've never seen it, and I think I'd rather like to see it. I'd like to see it. There's a gathering together of information about this park that, with information I didn't know. So how long would it take? What would be the impost on staff to pull together either a report or an info doc?
Through Madam Mayor, just refer that down
To the Barton?
Mr. Cant.
Through your worship, there's certain elements of this motion that we could respond to almost straight away. We would just get the relevant information together. Though there's certain of them though that we would require further investigation. We would need to work with the department to determine, particularly with respect to 1.2, that's the erosion of the creek and the current water flow management strategies. The water quality of the creek, we couldn't answer that just now. We'd have to do a little bit of investigation into that. And we don't know the 1.7 either, or 1.8. So there would be a little bit of work between us and the department, and then we'd have to look into that further, but it's not unsurmountable.
So if I can add to that question, this motion calls for a report for December 2020. Is that information that you don't currently have likely to be available before December 2020?
Through your worship, if council directs us to proceed, we would be able to get the information before then. That's correct.
And that my original question wasn't properly answered in how much work would there be? Is it days and days, hours and hours, or is this just pulling together something in, by a junior staff member?
Difficult to answer accurately. I'm not aware of the information that's at hand with the relevant department at this stage, so we would have to have that conversation with them.
I have another question, if I may. In terms of the water quality of the creek, 1.6, is that, how much does that affect Kensington Gardens Reserve? Is it, obviously it comes from Stonyfell quarries. Is it actually a big issue? Given that that's the source of what's proposed wetlands, potentially?
Through your worship, previously we had a lot of issue with the stormwater and the silt management of that, of the issues coming through into Kensington Gardens Reserve. However, we have worked quite a bit with Boral, in particular over the last few years, who have undertaken quite a bit of work on site with respect to retention dams and a few other initiatives up there. It's my understanding that the water quality has significantly improved over the years, and I'm not receiving the same level of residential contact or complaints from my team with respect to any of the water quality quality there. So without knowing the exact data, I don't think it's a major issue just now. However, the work that we're doing at Kensington Gardens will certainly assist with managing the water that comes down that stream as well.
Thank you.
Are you wishing to speak?
Oh, possibly,
But
but
not.
not right now.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Henschke next.
Well, thank you, Mayor. Got a question regarding what Councillor Lemon raised there about the water quality of the creek. Now, if we are asking for a report addressing the issue of water quality of the creek, that's a very broad requirement, because that could mean water quality testing over a period of 6 months. It costs quite a lot to every time you test the water quality from a creek, or maybe this is data that the Department of Environment, EPA, Boral already have. I don't know. And is it our role to get that data, and is that data owned by Boral? I'm just a bit confused about what the intent of knowing the water quality of the creek is precisely. It's quite a project, I imagine. Thank you. Can I have a response from the administration regarding that topic? Enlightening us, please.
Through me, maybe for Mr. Cant
Yeah, he's
to
ready.
attempt to answer components of that, but I'm aware that some of those questions we're unable to answer.
Yeah, that creek, as you would be aware, actually flows through private, public and state properties. There are, yeah, you're absolutely correct, it can be quite complicated to get accurate data, particularly over a longer period of time. I'm not aware of recent testing at that site, either by Boral, EPA or the state. I would need to take that on notice, and I would need to find out that information from the relevant parties.
Just a question then. You don't wish to speak yet?
No, thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak or ask questions? Councillor Hubel?
Just a couple of questions. Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, regarding 1.7, does the administration have any idea what that pipe is?
Through Your Worship, we're as much in the dark as you are at this moment, but we have asked some questions to see if we could find out. We don't have any answers yet, I'm afraid, sorry.
Very interesting, thank you. Also, I'm looking at the financial section of this motion. And look, given Councillor Davis is the author of this, perhaps it might be him that asked this, but CEO, you might be able to shed some light on the initial remedial works that are being spoken of and the financial implications. That's looking like $10,000 as a one-off, and then recurring $8,500. Now, as I understand, yes, the land is owned by DW, but here it says subject to a formal agreement with council. I'm a bit curious as to, yes, this is state government land, but we seem to be quite involved in the management of this land. So are you able to give some commentary on the way things sit with Ferguson with regards to our potential liabilities and obligations?
So, through Madam Mayor, and I'll stand corrected, my understanding is we undertake some works on behalf of you, and they agree to reimburse us for that expenditure. But, no, got it wrong.
Through the chair, I can confirm, when we met with the department's fire officers on site, we talked about the whole issue of the park being a low fire risk, but there is a perception from local residents of the concern as a result of the height of some of the weeds and the vegetation around the boundary of the park, particularly near the school and those residents on the northern side of the park. So in talking to Dr. Mark Ellis in terms of the work that we do on our reserves, we do a lot of perception management by making sure that the vegetation around the edges of those parks is slashed, so it doesn't become perceived as a fire risk during the summer. The department said that because this is a low risk park and they have scarce resources, That type of work wouldn't at that time be a priority for them, but they were very happy to talk about us potentially undertaking that work on their behalf at their cost. We've subsequently received an update from them to say that they are happy to do the initial slash, which equates to the 10,000 that's quoted there in the finances of this motion on notice. And then they're happy to talk to us about ongoing work, again at their cost, to maintain that on an annual programme. And that will be more in line with the 8,500 there that we talk about. But that would be subject to an agreement with the department. They will be happy to pick those costs up. And also from our side, that we can actually arrange that work with our contractors.
Can I just clarify that? So we would be undertaking the work, but they would pay for it? Correct. That is what I said in my initial response, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, cool.
Thank you. I'll sit there for the moment.
I have no more hands up and I have no names down here. Is there anyone who wishes to speak? Councillor Dawes. Okay.
What can I say here? I'm glad that Councillor Pickett said a misstep. I think that was spot on. I do acknowledge that Councillor Davis did in his motion just then, he spoke about the work of Councillor Turnbull mainly and Councillor Dawes. I do acknowledge that you said that. But I have to say I do feel for Councillor Turnbull, my co-councillor, who's been across this subject for over 10 months, since November of last year. What I find disappointing is that we did reach out to Councillor Davis last month, who had expressed an interest in the park due to a post on his Facebook page. So on our instigation, we decided that we would share what our knowledge and how we're going to resolve issues within the park over a very convivial Sunday morning coffee. And with no consultation, he has put forward this motion of notice tonight. I'm sure he would have been advised by administration to share this motion with the ward councillors. I do believe the report is unnecessary to the level of detail required. It is a state government site. They have the ultimate responsibility. It's not a city of Burnside Park we've heard so many times tonight. All the information that will be sought in the report will come from the state government. I do suggest that more work can be done on the wording that has been proposed here by Councillor Davis, because there are some parts to it which I agree with and also Councillor Turnbull agrees with. So what I'm hoping is that if this motion doesn't get up tonight, that we can still work with Councillor Davis to come up with another motion in the future. Now, just for everybody, I read this article and I have slightly plagiarised it on Monday. And I think it's quite relevant to what we are discussing tonight. It starts, if the first casualty of war is truth, and the first victim of a lack of respect, whether perceived or not, is trust. For this council, there must be a focus on building trust between us. We need the elected members to hold ourselves to a high standard. We need to demonstrate that our passion for the future of our city is matched by the integrity of our actions. Put simply, to lead by example. If this happens, then the community will have the reassurance in the elected members to take any risks required to help realise our city's potential. This guarantees a solid foundation that gives everyone the confidence to think about what's possible. If the trust is missing, so does the creativity to make things happen. Now, they're not all my own words, but they are so relevant tonight. I agree that robust debate is healthy, but trust is more healthy when respect naturally occurs. So I'll leave it on that, but I believe there are some parts to this motion of Councillor Davis that we could work with him, but please work with us. Thank you, Mayor.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? No, then I will go back to Councillor Davis to sum up.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your debate tonight. Let me start by saying that I put in the motion last week on a Tuesday. It was always my intention to get I put it in for the risk, finance and the legal part of it, which the administration prepared. It was always my intention to speak with Jenny and Mike, but my work overtook me, and I apologise to you both for not being able to have that discussion. In the last 2 days, I spoke with Councillor Dawes and also with Councillor Turnbull, and I said to them it certainly wasn't my intention, and I certainly didn't mean any disrespect. By putting in the motion, in fact, I thought that they would, I was hoping that they would, and I think that Councillor Dawes has in part endorsed a good portion of it in terms of collecting that data and putting that together, which I thank him for. I think, I hope that you'll still vote for this motion. I understand that there's been a lot levied at me, and I'll have to wear that on the chin, because that's my own fault for not speaking with the ward councillors on this issue. However, the questions that are raised and putting the report together is still quite an important thing. And in my view, what we've actually got here is we've got 4 different groups. We've got national parks, we've got the school, and the environmental group, which is run by a Year 11 student called Sarah, who's president of that group. There's 45 members of that group. We've got the Friends of Ferguson Conservation Park and also the council. Now, those 4 groups are all acting, I suppose, in different ways. So the school is looking at ways that they can help, and that group, that conservation park within the school is doing its thing. The Friends of Ferguson Conservation Park, and I spoke with Jeffrey Bishop, who's their president today, who supports this motion in terms of collating the data and putting into a report that we can all share and that we can all be appraised of. So, for example, the Friends of Ferguson Conservation Park have a management plan in place. And what does that look like? It's not something that we have access to or that's ever been brought to our attention. I mean, a lot of this information is actually readily available, and some of it would need to be requested from other departments. It doesn't contemplate going and actually undertaking a water study, but rather, addressing the following issues. And I've written it in those broad terms. And it could be, if we don't have that data available to us, that it's not available to us. Or perhaps it is. Perhaps it is a simple matter of writing to Parks and Gardens, or perhaps the EPA, or perhaps Boral, or is that, or even I think Jeffrey Bishop would be more than aware of what data was available. So once we have that, we can actually start to look and as a group, the 4 different entities, national parks, the school, the conservation group, and council can actually look at ways that we can actually work together. And Burnside Council has a lot of resources. And the national parks part of things have already started to use those resources. So I see nothing wrong in putting that information together into a brief that all of those entities can use. And we can then use as a basis upon which to jointly proceed with this, with the management of this park. It's not just, it is a national parks owned precinct, but it's something that absolutely benefits our residents, and a huge number of residents use it every single day. And I think it would baffle you how many actually do go in there. And there are a lot of our residents as well, and they do have their concerns. So things like the bushfire risk has been addressed as not being low risk. I think that that's important to table and put to this council, and for us to consider it, and for us to address that for our residents. And having that in a report, I think would benefit them, would benefit the conservation group. And the comments say that Councillor Turnbull made about the fallen trees. Well, I think it's important to put that in a report to say that they do add value to the park, so that we don't have perhaps different individuals going through and clearing it. Now, let me again, before I finish, apologise to the ward councillors. It certainly was my intention, and we met at that meeting, and they asked me what I think we should be doing there. And my intention was to collect the information that we had available. And I think that they do an excellent job in managing it. And I actually hope that they would second it and could see where I was going with it. And I apologise for not having the time or losing sight of the time before the council meetings. They do come around quite quickly. So I apologise again unreservedly for that. And notwithstanding that, councillors, I hope that you'll still support this. It's a valuable resource for us, in my view, we have that information, it's out there, it's not far away, but I'd like to pull that together into a report so that we can better work with our neighbours and our communities. So I hope that you'll support it. Thank you.
Those in favour? Those against? Not carried.
No.
Not lost. I couldn't think of the word. We usually have so many carried. Not carried. Carried not.
I rather like not carried. It's better.
Okay. All right, now there are no questions without notice. Oh, are there any questions without notice? Yes.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Question regarding the Legislative Review Committee on planning reform. Can I wait? Yeah.
Should that wait till that item comes up?
The CEO's
Yes.
report.
Can we wait till
Yes,
the
we
CEO
can.
and you can
Yeah.
withdraw that report and
Okay.
then ask the question?
Thank you.
All right.
Can I ask?
Yes.
Sorry, and I apologise, I haven't actually advised the stuff I was going to ask, but I was wondering if it's possible to get an update on the business parking.
Excuse me, can you address it to this,
Sorry,
to me
I
and
was wondering if
CEO
it's
and then?
possible to get an update on the business parking scheme and whether that has commenced.
Business parking? Do you
Yes,
want
yes,
to
certainly.
reply now or?
I'll ask
Order.
Mr.
Cooper?
Through the chair. As you may recall, we approached all the, or did a door knock on all the businesses along Ferguson Road, and they all expressed a desire that would be a good facility available to them. Unfortunately, after the council's decision to proceed with those business permits, we've only had 4 applications from businesses along that section. So well undersubscribed for the amount of parks that we thought we were going to make available. Rather than proceeding, we've done another push in the last week to write to all those businesses again and reminding them of the opportunity that we have there for those business permits and the fact that they are free of charge until the end of this calendar year. So before we do anything in terms of final allocations of business parks, we will make sure that we've heard back from all those businesses. So disappointing start, but we haven't given up yet.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right, I've not received any motion without notice information. Reports of officers, I'm just going to go through them and ask for you to withdraw if you wish. So the first one is the CEO report, Councillor HQ. Policy review, closed circuit TV, Councillor Lemon. Finance end of month report. Right, so can I have someone to move it? Councillor Cornish, seconded Councillor Dawes. All those in favour? Carried. Implementation of carbon offset scheme. I know Dr. Phil is at the back, dying to have somebody to talk about this one. I'm not sure who got their hand up first.
I was up first.
No, Councillor Hughes was first.
I was up first.
Why don't we paper, rock, scissors it?
Do you want to throw a coin in the air, or do you want to really fight about it?
I had my hand up before you even got there. No,
Well, that
I
doesn't count.
Yeah.
I asked an adjudicator on my right, and he said Councillor Hughes.
Sorry, I wasn't
Were
playing.
you looking at me?
Video footage, can we go
Did
back?
you have, yeah, let's go back. to the
CCTV perhaps.
It's like the Regis replay on the football goal.
I got an
Okay.
alternate motion.
Look, no,
Who
oh,
wishes to? We're still going to debate it anyway.
Picture when the report comes.
yeah, right, you have an alternative motion. That's fine.
Is that all right?
Well,
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
won't suit mine.
Okay. All right.
Okay, Councillor Hughes then.
Huge.
Park run event. Councillor Davis. Okay, we'll go through those ones first. So, Chief Executive Officer's report, Councillor Hinchey. Now you can ask that question that you wanted to about the Legislative Council.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I have a question regarding the response to state planning reforms on page 16. There's a planning reform steering group referred to, and they'll be called to discuss. And my question is, just clarifying that steering group is the Burnside Council Administration Steering Group.
Through those out, we can go that, yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And the next question is, once it's discussed, will the administration prepare a submission on behalf of council?
Yeah, if may, Madam Mayor, our intention is largely to just do a minor rework of the submission that council approved to go into as our initial submission. This is about, I guess, exercising every opportunity that we have to make our voice being heard. So largely, it'll be some minor amendments, but
Okay, thank you. And I noticed on Facebook, the administration to promote raising awareness of this requirement or opportunity for the residents and ratepayers to put submissions in by September the 12th, I think. But will there be other avenues for residents to be made aware apart from social media?
Well, I can answer this. This was actually in the advertiser. And I photocopied it, or I brought the article out of the advertiser into council to make sure that they hadn't missed it. And so the opportunity has been there for anyone or any group to put in a submission to the listening council, to that committee to look at everyone while looking at the petition that is provided.
Thank you. I'll move with the councillor's recommendation, the administration's recommendation.
Seconder, Councillor Cornish, and all those in favour?
No, I want to speak.
Sorry, I got a seconder before I saw you speak. Councillor.
Got a couple of questions.
Yes.
The first question is on page 23, halfway down the dot points. CSR, BRSR consultation review following workshop. Can you just expand a little on that for me, please?
Review constitution. Oh, sorry.
yes.
Following workshop, Karen?
Yes, sorry.
You can answer it, or I can.
The mayor's across.
Oh, look, it's just that they have long awaiting a constitutional review, and we have agreed that there would be a workshop before the constitution is reviewed by the council, and so that's what that report is.
So when's that likely to
They've
happen?
been waiting for it for about 6 months.
So when are we going to have a workshop?
Sometime in, it says here, September to October.
So that's question number one.
Yeah, so through Madam Mayor, late September.
Okay. Question number two. So actually, getting back to that, how long is it since they've updated their constitution? Do you know?
It's about 4 years. It was due for review. They have done the reviewing. It's just been waiting to come to council for us to review.
Thank you. And the third dot point from the bottom, street numbering policy, post-audit committee meeting in August. What does that mean?
The audit committee met last Monday a week ago, and to review a number of policies that are listed on here. Audit committee passed all of those policies, and those policies are now coming to council for your approval.
So street
naming and
numbering policy is coming to us?
Yes.
Has it come to us in draft form?
So the first step was to go to the audit committee for their recommendation to council. Mr. Cooper, is there any help us there?
Are the experts on street numbering?
Through the chair, that's correct. And following the presentation to the audit committee, those policies will be circulated to the elected members for the normal consultation period of 2 weeks before coming to council for final adoption.
Thank you.
Anything to do with numbers, Grant?
Is that right? Can I ask what it is in the remit of the audit committee? Does that say
All
what?
policies. All policies.
Oh, okay.
Why is that? I missed that.
All policies go through audit committee.
If information,
The CEO can answer that one.
we've got it for Mr. Cooper to elaborate on, because I asked the same question.
Excellent. So did I.
Through the chair, thank you. All financial policies or policies associated with the finance area go through audit. And the street numbering policy is part of our rates department. And surprisingly, it does have quite a few issues and lots of risks associated with that. So, and it actually generated quite a lot of discussion at audit committee last week. So,
It's a great read on both sides.
Any other questions?
No, I'd just like to speak. I'd like to go back to the response to state planning reforms, the article from the week of the Saturday Advertiser, which I too pulled out, photocopied and sent to staff. So it's good that they had backup. I'd like members to know that there is nothing stopping any one of us individually making a submission. I intend to make a submission, as I've done every time I've been invited. I urge you all to make a submission on behalf of your ward and the city to that select committee. That particular call for submissions is a direct result of the petition that went to Parliament. So it's gone to the Legislative Council and now they're calling for submissions. So that doesn't necessarily mean we have to do as individuals or even as council stuff that we've already done before. What we can do is something completely new, but I think it's very important to look at that as an opportunity to reinforce what our views are.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on that, on this matter?
Actually, yes,
Or you're going to be summing up?
I'll be summing up. Okay, very good.
So I'll just make sure there's no one else who wishes to speak, and then it is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Lemon. That's really important. Anyone can put a submission in. The council administration can put a submission in on behalf of residents and ratepayers. And I just wanted to also reflect that this has come it's been quite some months of effort by the community. And also I want to reflect and remember the efforts our new CEO made. I recall when he just started working very intensely with the administration and his team to engage with the residents and ratepayers at such short notice, and gathering them all together and the team pulling together these work forums at various locations around Adelaide. And I think, the residents and ratepayers are very grateful. And that a lot of them, I remember hearing at some of them, these forums, wow, we didn't know this was happening. My neighbour just told me. I raced out here to this forum and I'm glad to, to hear about this. This is the feeling I heard on some of these occasions. So I just wanted to thank Chris Cowley again, because it really was really very special that he had responded to the people so passionately. So I'm glad, and we've got to keep moving. And now we have a new minister for planning, and I really do hope we have a bright future there. Thank you.
Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Councillor Lemon.
Yes.
Policy reviews, closed circuit TV.
I have deep problems with both these policies, and I need to, in fact, start by giving a mea culpa. These were circulated to us some time ago, and whilst I always read, everything comes through to me. Some things I read more thoroughly than others, and clearly I didn't read these very thoroughly. Then, when I get the council agenda, I read it very thoroughly more than once. And having read this thoroughly now, I've got some problems with both the CCTV policy and the privacy policy. And I'd like to start with some questions.
You have a motion?
Yes, can you say if you got a motion, please?
That council receive the revised, not adopt. So I'll start with them separately. I'm looking at the CCTV one. Now, my dilemma,
Can we just might need to just seek some guidance at this point.
Do you have a future action in mind
Yes.
for the policies?
Yes. Maybe I should ask another question.
Just for the motion, in terms of guidance for me.
Yeah. So I'll ask another question, and the question is, if this was deferred for a month or 2 months, would that be a real tragedy in terms of the work that's ongoing?
Happy to support a deferral for a couple of months.
So, so how about we say that council defer the revised policies until November?
We'll have this motion come back in November.
Yes.
But this motion will be presented to council.
Councillor.
This motion be presented.
Councillor Lemon's motion.
Yeah, this motion be presented to council in November, at the first meeting in November. How's that? Is that better?
Yeah.
And you may not vote for this because you may not agree with what I've got to say, in which case it'll go through tonight.
Very possible.
But thank you,
Hey,
very possible indeed.
meant to be a good one.
One of the problems I had with this is the CCTV. Now, and this is my dilemma. With CCTV, I understand how useful that is in monitoring our infrastructure, monitoring our parks, and making sure that people are safe. I really do think that we live in a technological world and CCTV is good in that sense. On the other hand, increasingly I am very disturbed by the invasion of personal privacy in walking down the footpath. Yes, it's a council footpath. Do I want to be filmed at 11 o'clock at night? No, probably not. Do I want to be filmed because my dog's off a lead, which many of them are on the strange street, I can tell you? No, probably not. Do I have a right to privacy? Yes, I do. So the CCTV stuff actually disturbs me at a number of levels, but mostly it disturbs me because we haven't asked our community what they feel about it. We're just going to put this policy forward. We're going to have CCTV because God knows our rangers need body cams. So while on one hand, I actually see the importance of this, on the other, the preamble to this policy doesn't convince me. And I want it to come back and convince me that this is important before I actually sign up for rangers to have body cams. There isn't anything compelling in this that says to me these things should happen. So let's just leave CCTV because we've got two policies here. The other one is the privacy policy. And I've got to talk really quickly. I have got a particular interest in privacy because I don't believe that we have much of it as individuals anymore. I recently re-registered my car. I had to choose a CTP insurer. I chose a CTP insurer. Within a fortnight, I actually got their privacy policy. Then I joined the dots and I'd had, in the intervening 2 weeks, my mobile phone, my landline, and people knocking on the door selling me various things from what political party do you belong to do you want to buy a funeral and how's your life insurance these days? And when I joined the dots, when I read the privacy policy from this insurance company, it was they can sell my details to a third party. That's where they make their money, selling my details to a third party. I didn't sign up for that when I ticked the box for that particular cost. And then when I got this privacy policy, I then couldn't go online, which the piece of paper said I could, because all I got was the same piece of paper. I had to spend 40 minutes on the phone saying, do not disclose my details to anyone else. I do not want you to do that. This privacy policy doesn't actually nod to any of that. It doesn't actually, again, it doesn't convince me. It says, yes, we can actually disclose to a third party. Why would council disclose to a third party? Who are these third parties to which we will disclose? I think we need to tell our people who they are. I think we need to assure our people that we are going to keep their information because we've got the value of their house, we've got their address, we've got how much rates they pay. We've got whether they live alone, we've got the amount of cars that are actually registered if they're in a resident-only parking thing. I think this, does that give me another minute?
Yes.
I think that this privacy policy needs to be, it's a model policy. It's best practice, I'm told. They're all going to hate me at the end of tonight. It's best practice, I'm told, but I think it can be better. And I think it needs to have that nod that we value our residents. We need to, in fact, assure our residents that we're not going to use their information loosely. We need to look at this like the CCTV stuff. This is actually looking at things like using the State Records Act. So when you go back to what happened in one of the media feeds that we got this week, where there was a well-known Adelaide person that actually remonstrated rather appallingly with one of our parking inspectors. If he had a body cam, how long does that film stay? People need to know this stuff. It's really important that people know this stuff. Neither of these policies say that. I'd like it to be reworked to actually have more of a residents focus, more of assurance to residents, and actually do a bit of community consultation about CCTV, because I'm not altogether sure that people are just happy to have it without being asked. So I hope you support my amendment, which isn't going to hurt having it delayed a little.
Councillor Davis, are you seconding the amendment?
Unless Paul would like to.
Sorry, you had your hand up before.
Yeah, I'm
so
happy to. I think that's right. And so I think that when we have these situations where, and I can see what Councillor Lemon is saying in many instances, and her concerns. I think what she's really asking for is the ability to go away and ask those questions and explore them with the administration and potentially discuss potential changes with them. So I think that's quite right. And if we lose nothing by bringing it back, then we either come back with a, and it's not to say that the policies before us are wrong, I suppose, or that they're right even, but we have had a councillor who's keen to do some work on them and work with the administration on it. So I think that it's more than appropriate. It comes back in a couple of months. We lose nothing by it. So then we should support it.
Councillor Hubel?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I'd agree with Councillor Lemon that I would like to look at this in a bit more detail. Just a clarification, at point 18, looking at the summary changes, we're talking about these optical surveillance devices, mobile optical surveillance. Are we talking about chest cams there? Is that what we mean by those? Or are we talking about like portable things we can temporarily mount opposite a tree, which might be under contention, for example, or, you know, are we talking, what are we talking about when we say mobile optical surveillance?
Mr. Spearman.
Through the Mayor, thank you for the questions. For mobile optical surveillance, that is intending to be probably body cams. It's a moving camera effectively.
Okay, cool. That's what I thought. Yeah, look, I hope that this motion can get through and we can revisit it. I do want to talk about one part of it that I am particularly concerned about. And look, whenever we're looking at making decisions in what's best for the world around us, what we're doing is we're playing off rights against each other. The right to feel safe versus the right to, you know, do what I want, or the right to say what I want versus the right to not be offended. I think at paragraph 22, and 23, we talk about these mobile optical surveillance and listening devices, there being a situation in which implied consent is applied for members of the public maintaining the status quo of their behaviour. Talks about if an officer, who obviously I have complete faith in, being, you know, employed by the City of Burnside, if an officer attends a location, then any resident or any member of the public who doesn't immediately leave and takes themselves out of surveillance is implicitly implying consent to being surveilled. And I think we've got that the wrong way around. I think a lot of the trouble when Mark Zuckerberg was hounded by the United States Congress about, you know, Facebook's behaviour, I think one of the things that a lot of people failed to see was that how can this web service be making money off advertising, whereas the products that Facebook sells isn't a user experience in a social network. The product they're selling is the information of the members. So we have a choice with any commercial arrangement, whether it be a social media account we sign up for or an insurance policy we sign up for. We are opting in. We're saying, yes, I consent. And I think that needs to be the status quo. Opting in, not having to opt out. Now, I understand that some people might say, you know, oh, if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to worry about. I think that's the wrong argument. I think it's a really unhelpful and an unhealthy argument to be making. We do have our rights, and some places in the world, these rights we take for granted, they don't exist. But they exist here in Australia because we're looking out for them. So I think we really need to be treading carefully on this. Like it's been said, it may turn out that this is the way to go. Could very well be that way, but let's just really make sure.
Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to speak contrary to the motion that's there. I'm very happy with the policies. I did see them come through the info doc and I did read them. I thought that, you know, hey, we're joining the new age and actually getting the body cams. I thought, you know, at the end of the day, it might be a behavioural aspect in terms of both our rangers and members of the public would both behave better when there's someone actually recording the truth of what actually happens. And at the end of the day, all of this is just recording the truth. And it might be needed at one point. We've got a records management policy, which is all the videotapes and stuff like that are managed by records management, and we have to comply with state law and State Records Act on those sort of aspects. I don't have any issue with it at all. It would probably more than often just be used in a court of law, or heaven forbid, walking down Lestrange Street, it's some poor lass being chased by some man and the police are using that little 20-second footage to actually piece together what happened that night. That's what CCTV footage is mainly about, and that's how they track down the murderers in Melbourne from, you know, ATM cams and all those sort of, you know, bits and pieces to actually track down what actually occurs in these instances, and they get the truth. It's all about the truth. I've got no issue with the policies that are here. The rest of the world's up here. I'm pretty certain most of our residents actually know that it's happening. It's been happening for a while. We're just catching up. So I'm happy to move them as they are. But if you guys vote the other way, I'm happy to wait a couple more months and you guys to workshop your issues. So, but I won't be voting for the motion.
Councillor Henshins.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. I have a question, Mayor. What is the risk to council if we delay this privacy policy and CCTV policy? What is the corporate risk profile going to look like?
Through Madam Mayor, I don't believe we'll be unnecessarily exposed. There's a couple of things that I'm taking into consideration there. We're already bound as an organisation by the privacy principles that exist and dictate how we need to manage people's privacy. And in terms of the closed circuit television, particularly as it pertains, as we're talking to these mobile or body cam devices, again, I don't have any fear of us being unnecessarily exposed because our officers will still conduct their activities in a responsible manner, complying with the largely state and federal requirements they have to adhere to anyway. So I'm comfortable with the delay, and for what it's worth, I'm certainly feeling very comfortable about perhaps enhancing some of the wording to provide a higher level of comfort to our community.
Thank you. And the next question I have through the Mayor is in regards to the City of Holdfast Bay, they have implemented these body cams. That's obviously been successful for us to also be going down that path.
Through Madam Mayor, I don't have enough insight into how they operate at Holdfast Bay to provide comment on whether they're successful. I think we're basing our approach on evidence gleaned I guess, from experiences across various industries. And largely one of those factors is about providing a level of support and security for our officers. Should they be placed in circumstances where we need to rely on those recordings. But I do concur with the thoughts around the room that if we are to use them, we need to make sure that the right protocols are in place.
Thank you.
Councillor Hughes.
I just had a question. So obviously this is about future proofing, but there's no commitment to move down the body cam path at this stage. So do we have an indicative cost of if we're going to implement that? It's obviously something that's feasible in terms of cost, otherwise we wouldn't need to include it at this stage.
Through Mayor, happy. Mr. Spearman.
Yeah, to the Mayor, thank you for the question. No, we haven't costed anything yet. It's just to allow the possibility of it is the purpose of this. And then if after that we go through a full scoping process, make sure it meets all the legislation, all the reg quality control and all that kind of stuff. So we don't actually have an indicative price or how many of them we would need and all that kind of stuff. It's high level. Should we do it or not?
Right. Are there any further questions or does anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Dawes?
Yeah, I'm going to support the motion because I think Councillor Lennon is right. We need to get this right. I don't think there's a problem with delay of a couple of months. I have spoken to Mr. Spearman about this when it first came out, because when it first came out, you need to provide a lot of information here for us to be comfortable. And one of the things that worries me is the compliance side. All right, now in number 23, it says procedures be put into place to ensure council officers are aware of their responsibilities. I'd like a little bit more about that when we have with the workshop. I'm not too sure what we're going to be, but whatever we're going to do. So we just get all that information as to how it's going to work. And also, I wouldn't mind if the council made contact with those 3 councils who already have it in operation to say, well, how have you gone so far? You know, what were the little glitches that you had? And so forth, so we can get even more perfect system. I like the work that's been done, but waiting a couple of months is not going to hurt us, it's going to help us. Thank you.
Councillor Carbone.
Thank you, Worship. Look, this is one of those age-old debates that's been going around, I reckon, about 20 years about privacy versus security and so forth. And there was a movie with John Voight that I'm trying to get the name of right now. On this very matter. And I think if anyone in this room is actually worried about privacy, I reckon you're about 20 years too late, because everywhere we go right now is recorded. And I like what Councillor Cornish said about it's about the truth. And someone mentioned before about, there is that classic argument that, well, if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to worry about. The benefits always outweigh the costs. So if you're talking about CCTV footage, and if we think we have a right to record people in parks and so forth, just think about it now. No matter where you go in your day-to-day lives, you're being recorded. If you go to the supermarket, you're being recorded. When you're driving down the road, you're being recorded by the government and other cars. There's virtually nowhere you can go right now where you can't be recorded. So I don't think we need to be paranoid about it, because nothing is really going to change. And Councillor Cornish mentioned, how many crimes have been solved through CCTV footage? How many missing persons have been tracked down and so forth? Every time you watch those crime shows on TV, that missing element, the one thing that caught the murderer was the CCTV footage, maybe from someone's front porch. Okay, so I think we just need to chill out a little bit right now, okay? Don't be so paranoid. This is the way of the world. It's been the way of the world for 20 years. This is nothing new. The police do it. Every company in the world does it. You go down around a wall, you're recorded. So what's the difference? So if you're worried about privacy and you're really, really worried, you might need to live in a cave. But if you operate in the current world, you're going to be recorded everywhere. So if you're doing nothing wrong, you've got nothing to hide. So let's keep up. Let's In fact, let's get up with the times, okay, and let's implement this policy.
Councillor Jones.
Who came up with this phrase, if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear? Dr. Goebbels. Enough said, you know. Seriously, are we voting in favour of Nazis now? I'm in favour of Councillor Lemon's motion, I'm voting for it.
Thank you, Councillor Jones.
Can I ask a question?
You may ask a question, Councillor Cornish.
Does the city of Burnside have any knowledge of the number of private residents currently filming public places like parks?
3 minute Mayor.
With no policy, obviously, to actually manage how they handle and manage that footage that they collect.
So just to clarify, your question was, do we have knowledge of any private individuals filming our parks? We would be unable to quantify that data and be unaware of the magnitude of it.
But certainly it's possible and probable.
I've been sent personal YouTube accounts where they're just permanently night watching parks.
Yep.
So in our neighbourhood. So yeah.
Right, is there anyone else who wishes to speak or ask a question? If not, I'm going back to Councillor Lemon.
Thank you. I'll ask a question, if I may, to start off with. The CCTV part of these two policies, so there's two policies here, has a lot about staff in it. So would I be correct in saying that it is a two-part, or it's about public as well as staff?
3 minute Mayor. I'll probably take that one. So you're correct. And for example, we go to the privacy policy, we do mention various aspects as they relate to staff and various aspects as they relate to community. So it's dealing with both aspects.
So I would actually say that it would probably be useful to take that separate staffing issues out from residential issues. I know that they overlap in terms of CCTV and privacy policy, but I actually think to put them together in both these policies has also confused me a little, particularly given that under the CCTV part, there is a lot on staff. So I'd actually just like that taken out. So that would be a good thing. If I can now speak to it, thank you all for your comments. I would actually say that we don't live in a TV program. Well, my life doesn't actually take place in 50 minutes with ad breaks. And the cops get it from the CCTV. That's probably not real life, and you don't get to the judge within 5 minutes. So really, to talk about this is the reality of today means nothing to me because, you know, we make our own reality. The other thing I'd say is that there's two separate policies here, and I think that my co-counsellor has actually confused them. One is about CCTV and the other is about a privacy policy. They are separate things. In terms of the privacy policy, this council is actually not obliged to have a privacy policy, and in actual fact, it says at number 20, under privacy policy, paragraph 32, council is not bound by the Act, the Privacy Act 1988, which is out of date somewhat, one imagines. So what we've got here is actually a best practice privacy policy, which is probably best practice, but I actually think it can be better. So what I'd like to see is some tweaking of this. I'd like the staff stuff taken out. I'd like the CCTV to convince me a bit more where we need it and how. And I'd like the privacy policy to reassure our residents more that we're not going to flog their details to people that are selling prepaid funerals. Thanks very much. So I hope you support me on this, just to make these clearer as policies within this council that we will go to when we need to, and they need to be right. And again, at the end, I will actually apologise most profusely to my fellow members and especially to administration for not having picked this up when they came out as an info doc. I'm sorry, I read it properly this week, not properly like others read them properly when they first came out. My apologies. But let's get it right.
Right, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? And those against? Carried. Finance end of month report, we've done that one. Can I ask, I'm just going to, I need to just get a feeling from the meeting. Do you wish to have a break now? I kind of feel Councillor Hughes is going to have a different motion and the park run could take a while. It might be a good idea to perhaps take a break now and then have those two after the break. Are you happy to move that, Councillor Hughes? Councillor Dawes, all those in favour? Right, carried. So we will resume at 10:02 on the dot. 10:09. Sorry about this for the staff, we have to wait an extra few minutes, but I suspect these next two are going to take us a bit more time. So better to have a break now.
Correct, she's working in the ministerial office now. In
Excellent.
Councillor Hughes, do you wish to move something different, I believe, for 13.4?
Yes, I have sent through an alternate motion.
Wait for Rob.
So just wait for it to flick up.
Flip up.
I got this.
I think I said it. So I'll just briefly read it out. So that council supports in principle initiatives that aim to offset operational greenhouse gas emissions generated by council facilities and acknowledges the work to date on the Burnside carbon offset scheme proposal. But point 2, defers the consideration and implementation of the Burnside carbon offset scheme until presentation of the first annual environmental sustainability report in September 2020, allowing it to be considered holistically with all council environmental sustainability initiatives and achievements, given the integration and interdependency of the scheme with other opportunities and the overall climate roadmap. So I thank the staff for helping pull this together at the very 11th hour this afternoon. I guess reading the report, I certainly think that this is something that we should be working towards, and we should be thinking about our energy across the city and how we can perhaps offset carbon. But I think there's really a big picture that I would like to see in terms of how we look at this carbon offset versus, say, the installation of solar panels and things like that across the city. So I think we, as a council, I appreciate that the staff have done a lot of work behind the scenes, and we want to see the ball moving in terms of our climate emergency that we've declared. So despite the fact we have declared an emergency, I'm like saying, let's just hold on a little bit longer, because I think it would be really good as a council if we could see all of those pieces of the puzzle come together. And I think there's obviously been a lot of work that staff have done to date. So acknowledging that, but also saying that let's, as a council, see how this can all come together, so we can make sure that if we are going to implement this, we're moving down the best possible path. And I guess it does seem to be a bit of a theme tonight to defer things, but I think this is really for the right reason of seeing that bigger picture, as I mentioned. So I hope that you'll support this.
Seconded. Are you seconding, Councillor Lemon? Okay.
There you go.
I'm very happy to second this because when I read this, I really was appreciative of the work that's gone into this, but felt that there could have been more. And one of the things, I'm glad that we're going to have the workshop. I made notes on it, and that is that what this particular carbon offset, that's tree planting as carbon offset, it doesn't actually make reference, as far as I could see, to greening Adelaide, which I think needs to be partnered. But there's a couple of issues for me, and there's 3 things I want to talk about in terms of this, and I'm happy to see it as a bigger picture. One is that carbon offset through tree planting has its benefits, but it also has its how do we know if it's working or not? Because unless those trees are actually monitored, we don't know whether they've died. So that's the first thing. And I've recently read an article, and I don't remember it in its entirety, but it was perhaps you should spend your money elsewhere rather than in carbon offset, because that isn't necessarily where you should put your money. But I think that what staff have come up with in terms of how they're actually generating these funds is brilliant. And I just think, this is a really good idea. How can we do this better? So that's one. The other thing that bothered me a bit was that these trees would be planted in the Adelaide Hills. Now, Adelaide Hills has got many things, but it's got plenty of trees. So I thought that there was a missed opportunity in terms of partnering with some of our area councils. If we've got this body of money to plant trees, why wouldn't we look at places like Campbelltown? Why wouldn't we look at the Highbury Landfill Authority? Does that need trees? Why wouldn't we go further afield and look at Salisbury or Playford councils? Why wouldn't we go even further afield? I thought today, because today I was reading ABC News Online, and the article will still be there if any of you are interested. And that was, in this particular article, it was talking about the swift parrots, parrot swifts. And swifts, as usual with ABC News Online, it actually had an eastern seaboard centric focus. But we all know, those of us that have been to the Flinders Ranges and up north to Corn and places like that, and back to where we were born, we all know that swifts are actually in the northern part of South Australia. According to this article, they are now an endangered species. They breed in Tasmania, they come to the mainland to feed on eucalypts. So if we're going to have a carbon offset scheme, this is what I thought, having read that article, we're going to have a carbon offset scheme. And given that we've got a CEO that's just come from Whyalla and presumably still has really good contacts, why wouldn't we spend our money doing an urban forest that gives the swifts a habitat up north somewhere? Why wouldn't we do that? So these things I thought weren't explored in this article, in this motion, and they might all be really dumb ideas. I don't know, but I'd like to work them through, because I think that planting trees in the Adelaide Hills, yeah, it's a good idea. Planting trees is a good idea wherever you do it. But if we're going to gather this money, and it's not huge amounts, why don't we use it and get absolute bang for our buck by actually putting places where trees really need to be planted? And if the bonus is we can actually give a habitat to an endangered species so that we continue having swifts in the Flinders Ranges, let's have a go at doing that, because I think that'd be pretty good for us. It'd make me feel a lot better, or it'd make the residents of the city feel a lot better, and we'd be doing something in the longer term for the habitats and bird life and biodiversity in the state generally. And we could also partner with another council and make sure that those trees that are planted actually reach maturity and do what they're supposed to do. So I just think this is a good start. I reckon we can do better. So I thank Councillor Hughes for that motion.
Councillor Hubel, you're next.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, look, I'll support this. Look, again, it's a bit of a bump, but I think where it ends, where we end up because of the bump, I think is in a stronger position. I think I was very happy to support this as it was. I tend to put a lot of weight in officers' recommendations, and look, I think there is a lot more for us to know, which I'm sure will come to light in time. Look, my feeling was the annual review that the recommendation allowed for gave us a real opportunity to get started on a carbon offset scheme, establishing it. And the details of it, exactly what we're offsetting and exactly what we're doing to offset it, these are variables that will change. We install solar panels north facing on the roof of the Regal Theatre. There's a lot less trees that need to be planted because of the Regal Theatre. Same going, we find a better way of offsetting than planting trees, and that can be the case as well. So I think this is something that should always be looked at and be reviewed. So look, I'm pleased with where we're going, and I'll support the motion.
Next is Councillor Dawes.
A question first. I'm just intrigued. It's probably a question for the CEO as to, we put three things up now, and all good, we kind of did that sort of thing, but it wasn't deferred until September, is what Councillor Hughes' motion had before. But why do we want to put those three up first? Is there a reason for it? It just seemed a strange motion when I first saw it. I thought, there must be some urgency to it. Right?
Well, I guess the answer is the staff are really excited to start getting some runs on the board in this space. And I'll be honest, the staff came to me with them, which I thought was a brilliant initiative, and I wanted to support it. So I asked the staff to develop it, and this is what came forward. And we were always cognizant that it needed to fit into the broader spectrum, and I felt it certainly wouldn't be detracting from our the broader range of environmental initiatives. But you asked me why it's here tonight. It's because I'm supporting the staff with an initiative they brought to me.
Yeah. So my second question is, by deferring it by 1 month, not because we don't like it, but because we want to be part of the bigger scheme. from administration point of view, you're not going to be unhappy with that.
Certainly not. So through Madam Mayor, I really appreciated Councillor Hughes giving me a call earlier today and sharing her thoughts about the fact that she would like to consider it as part of the holistic package. Totally understand that, respect it, and have no issue in one of it.
Thank you, Beth. I'll leave it there. I'll leave it there.
Councillor Carbone, and then it's Councillor Piggott, and then Councillor Anstey.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I had the same questions. But I suppose another way I might ask maybe a simpler question, and that is there anything stopping us starting this now and then incorporating it into the strategy later down the track? Do we have to delay it?
Through Madam Mayor, if I'm understanding your question correctly, if the support for the motion in my recommendation got up, well, there's no reason why you couldn't do this now. But I do understand the benefit of considering it all together. I'm not quite understanding the question, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, the motion is that we delay it.
Yep.
And maybe incorporate it into this holistic strategy. Right?
Correct.
But given that it's a great idea, and I love it, and the staff love it, and it's probably going to happen anyway, can't we just start it now? And do we have to be so governed about these things? Can't we just do it and then incorporate it into the document later on?
Yeah, I think through Madam Mayor, Councillor, that's my recommendation.
Yeah.
But I'm very comfortable with what's been the counter proposals.
Council.
Yeah.
Another question I had, just a timing matter here, because obviously the theatre's opening and it's getting warmer and stuff. Is this going to cause any problems with advertised prices when we, if we delay it by opening the pool and so forth? Are there going to be any price timing issues?
I might just hand over to Michelle.
Yeah, through the chair, the fees and charges council currently have in place are as council has endorsed.
Sorry, Kenny, would you mind speaking up a little louder?
I will try to speak a little bit louder.
That's better. Already it's better. Thank you.
Council has already endorsed a set of fees and charges for this financial year, so they are fixed at what they are, unless council resolves something similar to what is in here tonight to amend those fees and charges. So the officer's recommendation would have seen those fees and charges amended and advertised prices would have changed accordingly. If we defer this for a few weeks, then obviously we don't have that resolution. They'll be what they are until we get to the point of amending that.
Okay, all right.
Councillor Piggott.
Yeah, thank you. Perhaps I'm going to just demonstrate how difficult this subject is. I'm supportive of the motion. In fact, I felt a very similar sort of, and I do understand wanting to get on with it. I do get that, and I do regret pushing back on an officer's recommendation. But my view on it was on a couple of fronts actually. I can see the neatness of upping swimming pool prices by 10 cents and sending it off and getting some trees planted. I share Councillor Lemon's issue with that, is that you're not really sure what happens thereafter. And I would like to see our policy perhaps not be looked at, this being picked up in a number of ways. One is we're talking about 10 cents on swimming pool and Regal and then to the half a dozen extra red bins that we're putting out. I think that brings up a few issues, and I actually feel I don't see why we shouldn't, at the risk of being accused of perhaps a climate change emergency tax that I might look to introduce. I don't see why there perhaps shouldn't be perhaps something across all fees and charges in the city that went into a fighting fund against climate change. And on that side, so I feel that we should widen the net. I can understand where this has come from, and I'm okay with that, and it is good to get going, but I think the motion allows us, I feel, to actually perhaps widen that net. I don't see any reason we shouldn't be doing that more citywide. It's not so direct. There's, the city generates carbon in all sorts of places. It's not just Regal and the swimming pool. And on the other side, I'd like to see it spent locally. I've gone completely the opposite way. I'm turning my back on the Swifts of the Flinders Ranges. But I wonder whether we should develop, and you've got to tell people, if you're going to charge me 50 cents extra to go to the swimming pool, perhaps I know that 50 cents goes into a pot And then out the other side comes solar panels on places we can put them, not necessarily in swimming pool. So I feel that's the way we should look at it. And for that reason, I certainly support the motion as it's been put. I think given the information around sort of the wider plan, I think it is worthwhile just to sit tight and look at it more holistically.
Councillor Henschke.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll speak first and then answer the question after that. Thank you. Okay, I support the motion and thank Councillor Hughes for making this motion, because it opens our eyes to the big picture, and the big picture being this first annual environmental sustainability report. I think it's a fantastic initiative of the administration, and I'm really grateful the administration is so innovative and forward-looking. And in my mind, I can't wait to see this environmental sustainability report doing things like helping us look with new eyes, a new lens, if you like, on everything we do. And I'm talking about even revisiting, why don't we revisit our plans? Some of those plans, the plans that we have, for example, for the 100-year-old trees down Alexandra Avenue and Prescott Terrace. The plan at the moment is that we remove those 100-year-old trees and replace them with little trees. The big picture, if you look at that plan, that action, is this week we have, as a council, because we have this plan, actually destroyed 100-year-old trees, each of them 5 tonnes of carbon, 100 years of carbon stored in each tree. That's 20 tonnes this week. Has been mulched. So, shall we just wait for these 100-year-old trees to stand there and die? Wait for a few years, let them just continue on their merry path. It's so relevant because we are here looking at, we need to look at the big picture, and trees like that probably need to remain in place until they're old and completely frail. We don't get rid of old people because they're old and say, oh, we'll just have another baby. Let these trees remain where they are. The residents want to see these trees remain where they are.
Excuse me, Councillor, I'm not quite sure how this is relevant.
The big picture is relevant because we have here in this motion, we need to see the annual environmental sustainability report. And in that, it opens our eyes to a bigger picture where current plans like that one need to be revisited.
So you had a question as well?
And that's my question, is whether or not such plans could be revisited with this new lens that we have for the environmental sustainability report.
Sorry, I was just getting some clarification, Madam Mayor, about some of those trees that were mentioned. I think the short answer is Council's made a climate emergency declaration, and we are going to do all in our power to deliver on that. But along the way, there are going to be some matters, such as the Prescott Tree Removal Program, which we are just going to have to deal with because of other nuances around the age of trees. But I think the key fundamentals of how Burnside treats its trees, its canopy, and its broad focus on the environment will, of course, all be handled in the most innovative manner that we can to achieve our outcomes. I've kind of given a bit of a nothing answer, but no. I'm acknowledging that there are some things we need to do that may seem a little bit counterintuitive, but our focus is always on that end game.
Short-term losses for long-term gains, perhaps.
Or may I ask that through the Mayor that we revisit plans that were prepared in the context years ago, before we went into a climate change policy.
And certain undertaking is, we won't be blindly following plans that are now out of date with contemporary knowledge.
Okay, thank you.
So I hope you can thank you.
I think something to make sure that way. Right, Councillor Davis.
I think we have two problems in this. We have the carbon emissions that we've put out in the past as a population, and then we've got the carbon emissions that we're going to put out in the future. So my understanding is there's 40 billion tonnes of carbon that we as a population put out every year. Now, in order to reverse the emissions that we've put out over the past 100 years, you'd need to plant, and that's to keep it stable, you need to plant the size of America in trees in order to reverse that. In my mind, what we should be doing is looking at strategies, first of all, to, like if we're looking at putting in those types of taxes, is to actually reduce the amount of carbon that we're actually putting into the atmosphere. And so that should be looking at wind or solar or even other technologies such as fusion. We should be investing in those, not Burnside Council, but we as a globe should be investing in that type of technology in order to reduce our emissions going forward. And then we should look at the strategy for reducing our emissions going back 100 years. And to me, those two things are very different prospects. And I suppose if you look at things where, like every time you mulch a tree, all of that carbon goes straight back into the atmosphere. So it's not a permanent sink of carbon. The only way to just stop it coming into the atmosphere is by not burning coal or oil. So I think that that's what we should be focusing on in terms of our reducing. If we're going to become carbon neutral, my personal view is we shouldn't be claiming that by creating trees, which is a temporary sink, rather than, and a limited sink, rather than actually investing in renewables to reduce our consumption of coal or fossil fuels, which are continually being injected into the atmosphere. We're not going to stop climate change by sinking it with trees. So that's my thought process in it. And I don't think that we should shy away from creating sinks, but we should absolutely be looking at reducing our emissions to zero in terms of our fossil fuels, and then looking to unwind the damage of the past. And if we plant trees and if we have things like, what's happening on Ramallo Avenue, all of that carbon goes straight back into the atmosphere. So as a whole, trees are carbon neutral, and they are a temporary sink. And as soon as they die, as soon as the leaves come off, as soon as they fall over and they decay, the carbon is immediately reduced. Well, over time is reduced back in the atmosphere. So that's what I would like to see us focus on. And then also look at a sinking fund where we can reduce the amount of carbon in our atmosphere as a separate issue. But going forward, to me, carbon neutral means no further emissions, no further burning of fossil fuels.
Councillor Jones.
Thanks, and Mayor, sorry. I just want to make 2 points really. Look, I think planting trees is a good idea. I like trees. Climate change is caused by the sun, but planting trees is still a good idea.
And 5G.
I think we need to consider 3,500 trees a year that we're planting. One of my first jobs when I moved to South Australia was to help develop an olive plantation. And we got 71,000 trees on 225 hectares. So, but if we're planting 3,500 trees a year, that's going to take up about 10 hectares. So Councillor Pigott, I don't think we're going to be able to plant them locally, because in 10 years' time, we're going to have 100 hectares of trees, which is a square kilometre. So that's a lot of land. And I did speak to the CEO. I agree with Councillor Lemon. We need to be partnering with a regional council, I think, to squeeze that many trees in, because we're just not going to get them in the metro area. I'd personally like to plant commercial trees in a regional area and create some regional employment for people. And at least that way, your trees are being looked after because they're commercial trees, and they're not just being planted by some shonky fly-by-night merchants who plant the trees and you never know whether they're being looked after, which is what Councillor Lemon said. I think the second thing, look at holistically, part of the reason we're having to plant these trees, look at the swimming pool. Where is the sense in using gas to heat an open air pool to 27 degrees from 6 o'clock in the morning? This is just stupid, isn't it? If you want to cut greenhouse gases, say we're going to heat the pool with solar, And if it's a bit cold in the morning, toughen up, princesses. There's a climate emergency. I mean, seriously? Turn the air conditioning up 1 or 2 degrees. So, I mean, the library, you go in there, you've got to put 2 jumpers on, it's so flipping cold. Make it so not so hot, but so I agree, some kind of holistic policy. That said, planting trees, great idea, I love trees. It has all kinds of other benefits, but I do think we need a bit more time to think about it. But I will support the motion.
Thank you, councillor Jones. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Otherwise, I shall go back to councillor Hughes.
Happy to leave it as it is.
Right, those in favour? Those against? Carried. Well done. And thank you, staff. Thank you, Phil and Michelle.
Sorry.
Now, the next one is 13.5, Park Run event, and it's councillor Davis.
Thank you. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation. I think this is right. I think it's always going to be an issue in terms of park run, the impact that it'll have on local residents, and particularly we've done the survey of rugby, but I think that it's prudent to do a survey of the parking and the traffic imposition of cricket, and also go to community consultation. So I did have an email list or a group of residents that I notified around Ferguson Reserve that this is something that was coming to council. There was a number who came back and said parking's already a nightmare, and a number who said, yes, I can't wait to do it. I've got friends who've done park run, and I'd like to, I love it in Ferguson Reserve. We've also spoken with the clubs about it as well, who are interested in exploring it further, but their concern also was parking. So I think that this is the right way forward. I know it seems like a small kind of project, but I think if you're trying to fit it into an already busy Ferguson Reserve, whether it's possible is something we should consider further and make sure that, I suppose, that it's a workable program that we can run with. So I hope to support the officer's recommendation.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Hubel.
Thank you, Your Worship. Oh, I don't really want to speak to this. We know this is good. Let's keep it moving.
Anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Dawes and then Councillor Carbone.
Yes,
I'll just beat the other margin.
I will be supporting the motion. There was a mention of Mount Osmond in there, and it talks about a trial run there as a possibility. Trail run. Okay. Off-road. I thought they actually misspelled it. But anyhow, so thank you, Councillor Jones. Mount Osmond, there's no parking, there's no toilets. It might be a trail for, say, more elite runners in park runners. That's how I'm gathering it. But yeah, I'd like to see a best have a look at that as well. I am worried about having any sort of run, especially during the summer months. But I think the procedures recommended by the officers are appropriate. One concern I have is that with COVID, in summer, there are tons of kids on Saturday morning playing cricket on those 3 ovals there. Little oval, but they mark it out and have plastic bats and so forth. I'm hoping that or the actual numbers involved with that will still be there in October onwards when they do the survey. If not, it may give us the wrong stats. In winter, there's no issue because there are plenty of parks, and that's what's been shown to us. But in summer, there's definitely a problem if it's a normal Saturday morning in summer, plus junior tennis, etc. But I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Councillor Carbone.
Thank you, Worship. I'm conflicted, and I don't know which way to vote. And I'm hoping the mover might be able to address my fears in his summing up. But sorry, there's summing up. But we need to encourage physical activity. That's a given. But at the same time, I have a very good memory of this chamber debating the Kensington Gardens Reserve when it came to the Wheel Park. And we were told very clearly by the ward councillors that the Kensington Gardens Reserve is at capacity. No more people, no more music, no more sound, no more cars, no more car parks, nothing. At capacity, not an inch to move. And I remember that debate, and I didn't, but most people voted in favour of that idea, and therefore forgetting the Wheel Park. So I'm conflicted, because if that is true, and we can't have a Wheel Park, and we can't have 30 children going for a ride on a Saturday morning, then how is it possible that we can have an event that's 10 times as big, and it's going to have 10 times as many cars and so
You
forth?
get your chance to speak.
Well, I can raise a point of order if you like.
No, I don't believe it's a point of order.
I can still make a point. I can still call for a point. Like the debate seems to be more about the Wheel Park than the actual park.
He's perfectly entitled to bring up a comparison and an issue in relation to Kensington Gardens Reserve. I have no problem with that, and you will have the opportunity to sum up at the end. You'll have your chance to speak differently if you have a different opinion at that point in time. In the meantime.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Well, it's a comparison, and I don't get it. I don't get it. We sat here and we all voted and we all agreed that the Kensington Gardens Reserve was at capacity. Now, was that true, or was that just a fur fee because of the Wheel Park? Because if that's true, if we are at capacity at the Kensington Gardens Reserve, as we heard so clearly on that night, then how is it possible that we can entertain this sort of idea, which is going to have 300 people versus 30 children? It's not going to happen. They all came to the council chamber and they all screamed and carried on and sent us emails about how they can't possibly cope with any more activity. And yet here we are, a year later, saying, don't worry about those issues. We can have an event that's 10 times as large every single week. So I think we should do what's probably going to happen anyway. We're going to have to knock this on the head because we don't have capacity. You can forget Glen Osmond, and I think you can forget Kensington Gardens Reserve. We have something in the Victoria Park. It's literally 2 suburbs in that direction, okay? That's close enough. But if we do go ahead with this, okay, I would love to know what you're going to tell the Wheel Park people why their idea wasn't good enough, but this idea is.
Councillor Hughes.
Well, Councillor Carbone has perhaps stolen some of my arguments that I was going to make, because I'm actually going to talk against this tonight. And although I am a massive supporter of getting people active out in our community, I can actually think of better ways to spend $7,000. And we've just come off the motion talking about the environment and what we can do in terms of carbon offset. And I think these type of events, having actually been to a park run myself, didn't do it very well or very fast with 2 children in tow, but they actually thrive and are driven by volunteers. And I think if this had come to council from 10 people in our community who said, we think this would be great, we would love to own this and run this and have the passion to do that, I think I might be supportive. But I think some of the arguments that we've already heard from Councillor Carbone about Kensington Gardens Reserve already being at capacity, you know, I see that there are benefits encouraging people to get out, but I think having the path there will actually encourage people to get out and about, and they'll just be able to do it in their own free time without us having to cough up $7,000. I know in the scheme of it, that's not a significant amount of money, but I just am sitting here thinking we could probably spend that money better. You know, I'm happy to reconsider that if once the park's done and we can see how it's being used. But as Reserve mentioned, I think there are 2 close options for people to go to in terms of Victoria Park. And I think most people, you might catch a few people within walking distance, but a lot of people do ideally drive to these events. A lot of people actually try and make an effort to go and do each one around Adelaide, so you do get a lot of traffic. And I similarly am sitting here saying, We sat in that council meeting last year and we heard people tell us that that park is at capacity. So that, for that reason, I think I'm happy just to let this one go through to the keeper and let it play out without going any further.
Councillor Piggott.
Thank you. Firstly, just a comment for someone who's not sure which way he's going to vote. Put a compelling argument against the motion. And that said, I'm not sure I'm being misquoted in regard to whether it was capacity. I do remember talking about the reserve being, doing a lot of heavy lifting, and it does do a lot of work. It does do a lot for the city of Burnside. There's no question. And perhaps the way to answer the question is the community consultation that this motion actually asks for. It's because it's by no means, in my view, as ward councillor, that it will be something that will be embraced by the people around Kensington Garden Reserve for that reason. It is a busy park. So we are talking about something on a Saturday morning as opposed to something there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I think they're not directly comparable. I do feel that there is a lot of investment going into Kensington Gardens Reserve. We are upgrading the paths throughout that in the current project, throughout the reserve. This has an immediate payback if it's something that can get up and running and the people around it support it. So whether a different argument for a different time, I doubt I'm the only one guilty of that around the chamber, if I am. But I am interested to see what happens because I think it is line ball. Park run as a concept seems like a good idea. It's not something I'll probably partake. I think Mount Osmond is off the table, trial or trail. I don't see that going forward. So, but I think it is something that the city of Burnside would probably embrace. Whether Kensington Gardens works, I think we'll know more with the second car park survey. Interesting, I thought it was the opposite, but I think Councillor George is possibly right in the sort of junior cricket, Milo cricket or whatever it's called now, on a Saturday morning. I felt rugby probably was putting the most strain on that car park. I think perhaps in the afternoons during sport they probably do. So that'll be interesting as well. So I feel that it is the question's worth asking, and I will be interested to see what the local residents do come back with. And one of us will be right. So I'm supporting the motion.
Is there anyone else who would come? Councillor Jones and then Councillor Turnbull.
I wonder, given that we're doing consultation, could we subtly amend point 3 to say potential Kensington Gardens Reserve park run, or to add skate park into the consultation?
I'd love to see it happen, but
Why is it ultra virus?
This motion the council had, there is never to go in that reserve. So we can't say that we're going to put it in the reserve.
We're not putting it in the reserve, we're having consultation.
Why would we do that?
Madam Mayor, I think this is mischief making and nothing.
it's
No, I think it's great.
I don't think he's deliberately trying to mischief make, but I don't believe he
Of course, not a realistic suggestion.
Let me finish. But I don't believe he understands that he can't do that. Right? You
Absolutely can't.
Can't do it.
Rescission
Well,
motion.
I'm going to leave it to the CEO to explain.
Right, so through Madam, there is a current motion, live motion, sorry, not live, a position for council on the books, which says that there will not be skate park in Ogia. So
And that's forever.
Yeah.
Right.
until
Okay.
council.
All right. Okay, fair enough.
changes his mind.
Until a rescission motion. Until a rescission, that's the answer.
So my advice would be not to consult.
Okay. All right. That's fair.
As you've already made the decision.
Otherwise, you put forward a perception that that's a possibility, and that would be an unreal possibility. It would not be a reality.
Okay.
So therefore, it would be misguiding the community like this.
Right, in fact, in terms of the legal side, Madam Mayor, you would rescind that prior motion, you can clear air, and then proceed with whichever avenue you took.
Okay, but I do recognise the points that councillors have made, that it does seem a bit odd that you can say one is fine and the other is not.
So do you wish to speak
No,
further?
that was my
Right,
question.
now then it's councillor Turnbull and then councillor Lemon.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm informed that the cost of repairing this park fund report is about $1,250 to $1,500 with salary costs, etc. I don't think it's a prudent, responsible use of money, especially at the moment when on page 52 of our agenda it says in the finance report that the council finances are so far nearly $500,000 down. I think both venues are unsuitable. Kensington Gardens overutilised, especially in summer. The residents living adjacent to the reserves love the slamming of car doors early every Saturday morning. Not, they will be here in the droves if they're allowed in. Accordingly, we've been informed that it's too utilised for a skate park. They have 300 people standing on this poor park every Saturday, along with everybody else. And Mayor Oswald, that's absolutely out of your order because it's no parking, no toilets, no nothing. So there are successful park runs operating at Lockhill Park, 8.4 kilometres from the Civic Centre, and Victoria Park, 4.9 kilometres from the Civic Centre. Why don't people use these facilities? Let's not waste money on another report counting cars and car parks in the summer. We've done the winter. I will not support this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Lemon.
I have a question, if I may. The question is, the park run, does that require permanent infrastructure?
Through Madam Mayor, essentially the infrastructure that we utilised would already be installed during the normal process of our upgrade of KGR. So we're not installing infrastructure particularly for park run.
Would you change the way you install infrastructure if this got up?
No.
So in actual fact, park run will take place no matter what we do at Kensington Gardens?
Not necessarily so, because obviously it's a council controlled reserve, so council would always have an oversight of that. And it does require, if it were a community group that was trying to run this, one thing they have to pay their $7,000 to park run, and then it can get our approval to utilise our reserves in that way.
Okay.
So we do have control over that.
So part two is, what sort of permanent infrastructure would a skate park require?
Through Madam Mayor, I'm fairly certain.
Lots of concrete, would you say?
As you'll be aware, the skate park can have many forms, but generally it's permanent infrastructure specifically for the purpose of
Huge
skating
amounts
or
of
rolling.
embodied energy in the way of concrete?
That is an option.
Thank you.
So you wish to speak?
No, that was fine.
Okay.
Do I need to?
No, is there anyone else who wishes? Councillor Henschke?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Got a question regarding page 73, paragraph 35, states that to actually complete the 5 kilometre run without crossing any internal road or driveway, you've got to do 2 laps and a sort of running back over the same path kind of thing. I think that's what the 2 laps of an out and back course means. So when I'm looking at the map of the park run on page 78, the park run crosses entrances to the park in a number of places. 1, 2, 3, maybe 4, 5 roadways. Is there a risk that there is a vehicle pedestrian interaction because of the number of times a runner would have to navigate a road that would be used by users of Kensington Park Reserve? And does it have implications for park run, whether it's actually feasible at all?
Through Madam Mayor, I'm happy to hand it over to Mr. Cairn.
Through your worship, do you have a colour copy that you're referring to?
Yes, I do.
The proposed indicative course is the red path, and it doesn't cross any crossovers or roads, public roads. and Park Run has approved the indicative path.
If I can further support that, Park Run will not approve a run that was required to go over a roadway. As Mr. Cantor said, they've indicatively approved this course, i.e. it would meet with their criteria. So therefore, it certainly does not cross public roadways.
But I can see on West Terrace, I think it is, a road going into the park and a red line going across that road.
So I think I noticed there's access footpaths and pathway.
Oh, and roads. Okay, that's a different, thank you. Yeah, access footpaths versus roads.
Can I just ask a clarification question? The red, since we're talking about this red line, is that red line where the path is going in? That's proposed for the path.
Through your worship, that's correct. The blue and the red is actually the extent of the new path that's going into Kensington Gardens as part of the Epsom project. The red, though, indicates 5 kilometres that would meet the requirements of Park Run.
And how much is that path actually costing us? I know we got grant for it, but how much is it actually costing for this bitumen path? No, it's not bitumen, is it? It's a compound or something.
That's correct. We have an indicative cost. However, that would be subject to the market when we go to market shortly. I would be able to provide you that information.
Ballpark figure between 100 and 200,000, 50 and 100?
I think in fairness to Mr. Camp,
okay, fair enough.
It is a difficult question to
answer.
answer.
That's fine.
But can I just add to that though? The path is being constructed because it's a good outcome for that reserve. It's not being constructed particularly for Park Run.
I'm happy that it is an actual solid path of some kind anyway, because what's happening up on Mount Osmond currently is that the massive use of the path up on through Brock Reserve and up on Mount Osmond itself is actually being worn away, driven down into the ground, widened and broadened by the huge amount of traffic, foot traffic that is already actually happening up there. So that's why I'm glad to see that this is a solid path, because if not, same potential thing could happen. Right, is there anyone else who wishes to speak? All right, then it's back to Councillor Davis.
No way, I'm not putting it. Don't get taken foot motions. In every single speech and every single discussion we've had about this, I've expressly stated that I have concerns about parking in existing use. And I actually stated it at the start of my opening. It's always good to listen, I think, and understand what's happening in the report. You might have convinced me, actually. The issue is, I think, it's not the best track. And I mean, in South Australia, there are 9 tracks which are, double loop. And I think that this track would be, it's not great. And I think that's fair to say. And therefore, would also attract less runners. And to Councillor Hughes, the reason why this came here is because the organiser or the founder of Campbelltown Park Run invited me along, and I spoke with his volunteers, and he said that a number of their volunteers do come from the area, and that they run in Campbelltown, and they'd approached him saying, we'd like something in Burnside. So it's actually a councillor from Campbelltown who brought this to my attention. So that's why I brought it up for discussion. And that the whole point, I don't need to convince Councillor Carbone of anything, because it's in points 1, 2, 3, and 4. Can it actually handle it? And I guess that's really the question. And I have my doubts. And I suppose what I'm hoping, or I guess what my vision or my thought would be, is that I don't think it's going to become a destination park run that many people would use because of its nature. But I do think, and I've had mixed reviews from my residents, and a lot of them say, well, we'd love to walk there and actually go and use it. And the Cricket and Rugby Club, they were very concerned about, the imposition and the already use of the park, but they did say that some of their existing members could actually utilise it. I'd also encourage members to actually go back and revisit the skate park debate, because I think a lot of the questions there were really missed, and Councillor Levin brought them out, is that in my view, the skate park should be, if we're going to provide a facility, it should be 1,000 square metre facility that should be for elite skateboarding. That's what I would like to see happen. I would like to see a premium facility for the eastern suburbs that people can train on to an advanced level. That's what I would like to see. What was contemplated in Kensington Gardens is a half pipe. It doesn't have the capacity. What would happen is that skate park would go directly opposite the kindergarten. That's where it's, and knock down those trees there. So that's where it's intended to go. So vote with your conscience. I suppose that's the only way that I can put it. But yeah, you're quite right in terms of, my view is that it's not the best track, and I guess I'm torn. So I'd love to see what the information is and see if it could be gone there. I'd love to see what the community consultation is. But Councillor Turnbull makes a very good point in terms of our budgetary requirements as well. And is this really something we want to go now? And we'd have to wait so long as well for that study to come back. So perhaps now isn't the right time to push it. But at the same time, I'd like to find out whether we can close this off. So we've been down this journey with exploring Kensington Gardens Reserve. So I'm of the mind to finish that off. So I suppose vote with your conscience.
I do. That's a compelling sell.
Have you finished, Councillor Davis?
It's
I can go again.
No, I just want to know whether I can put it to the vote or not.
Yeah, put it.
Right, I don't want to cut you off if you still have something more to say. Right, those in favour? Those against?
Division.
The motion is lost. And a division has been called, so those who voted in favour, please.
Oh, you've
Yes. Councillor Carbone, you called the division, didn't you?
Yes, I
Okay,
stood up
thank
too
you.
soon.
So those in favour are Councillor Cornish, Councillor Piggott. 1, 2, 3. No, we changed.
Yeah.
Councillor Cornish, Councillor Piggott, Councillor Davis, Councillor
Close
Levin, Councillor Dawes, and Councillor Hubel. And that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Still, I suddenly thought there was a sixth one up there.
Yeah, there is.
No, there's six.
There is.
There are six. Okay,
Yes,
so
one.
it has changed.
Henry changed.
Outcome.
Yeah.
Because Councillor
Carried.
Oh, hang on,
Davis.
you've still got to count.
Yeah, you got
Yeah, I know. All right, and those against, Councillor Henschke, Councillor
It's not my
Hughes,
fault.
Councillor
It's
Carbone,
risky to call it
Councillor
business.
Turnbull,
Thankfully.
Councillor Jones, against. So the motion is carried. I do know what I'm doing. I just wanted, I'm pretty sure someone had changed their mind.
Yes.
So-
No, your worship, Henry changed his mind.
Yes, I know.
We've worked that out, Councillor.
So we are now going
Thank you for your
to
insight.
preventive consultation. Right, okay.
If I can.
I move down to subsidiaries. There's nothing from East Waste. Eastern Health Authority, and I need a mover. Councillor Cornish, seconded Councillor Hughes. Those in favour? Carried. Bramble Creek. I hope that you found this information useful to you about Brownhill Creek. I did try to initiate, and it's still on the cards for happening, an opportunity through a workshop, a Zoom workshop, that would allow all councillors in all of the 5 council areas that are involved with Brownhill Creek to hear directly from the Brownhill Creek Authority. I'm still waiting for an outcome in terms of that opportunity, but I believe that it is coming. It's been coming for several months. But I think it is important that people have the opportunity to ask questions about it. And it's not just the councillors who are new to this project, from the last election in this council area, but also in other council areas who are not aware of the history or the background or the direction that this is actually taking. Councillor Lemon.
Just a question, if you manage to pull that off, can you just, a rough guess, how many councillors are we talking?
Well, there's 5 councillors, so potentially
60.
60?
Gee, that'll be a Zoom not to miss.
Well, we've been on ones with the Premier and the Deputy.
Can you hear me?
300. So,
I can't hear you.
anyway, it's an opportunity, and hopefully that will arise. For those of you who've got a background in the history, you may not be involved and may not want to be involved. But the issue is there are a number of people around the table who are new to this project, and in all councils it's exactly the same, and hence there is a need for an again, I'm going to use that word, holistic approach, so people actually are more aware of what's actually going on. Mayor's report. Sorry, we need a mover and a seconder for Brown Hill Creek. Councillor Dawes, Councillor Lemon seconded. All those in favour? Carried. Mayor's report. Councillor Cornish, Councillor Cornish, seconded Councillor Henschke. All in favour? Carried. Just a reminder about any reports, members, delegates and working parties, get them to Rob. Letter from the member for Hartley, council correspondence. We have a mover, please. Councillor Cornish, seconded Councillor Piggott. All those in favour? Carried. Any other business?
I'd just like to give a big shout out to the staff and thank them for setting up every night for our council meetings. And getting us more and more microphones every time. They seem to be breeding. So I'd like to, it's a lot of effort trying to set up during COVID, and I'd like to acknowledge and thank all the staff for doing all of that work for us to make in person.
Well said, Dave.
Councillor Davis, and then somebody over here, Councillor Dawes, I think. Councillor Davis.
I would just like to state that the Electoral Commission is doing its boundary redistribution of our, of electorates, and so you should just be aware of that. And I'd suggest having a look at the different boundary changes for our different state members. I think it's quite an important issue because we divide our communities in a number of different ways, and we divide them by council boundaries. We also divide them by our state electorates. And so if you have a particular view on that, I just bring it to your attention and suggest you make a submission on it.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Dawes, I think it was. Somebody over here had their hand up. Oh, I'm imagining.
Oh, no,
maybe it was just a scratch of the head. All right. No other business. Then there are no confidential items, so we'll close the meeting at 9:48. And thank you for your attendance, staff and elected members.
Thank you.
Thank you.